In historical records, Martin Luther King Jr. stands as a shining beacon who advocated for justice, equality, and hope. He was born on January 15, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia, and became a charismatic leader and tireless advocate for civil rights. During the 1950s and 1960s, he emerged as an iconic figure in the fight for racial equality in the United States. His life was marked by peaceful resistance and the unwavering pursuit of freedom, inspiring millions of people to oppose discrimination and segregation. Through his powerful speeches and unwavering commitment to nonviolence, Martin Luther King left a lasting legacy that transcends generations. He reminds us that realizing the dream of equality and justice is a collective responsibility that we must all assume. In this video, we will explore the life and lasting impact of this civil rights icon who changed the course of American history. Martin Luther King, an American Baptist pastor, stood out as a leader in the long struggle of African Americans for full rights, leading this cause since 1955. The son of a Baptist minister, Martin Luther King trained in theology at Boston University. From an early age, he was aware of the social and racial segregation that affected African Americans in his country, especially in the southern states. Becoming a Baptist pastor, he assumed leadership of a church in Montgomery, Alabama, in 1954. He soon demonstrated his charisma and determined commitment to advocating for civil rights through peaceful methods, taking inspiration from Mahatma Gandhi and Henry David Thoreau's theory of civil disobedience. These same sources simultaneously inspired Nelson Mandela's fight against racial discrimination in South Africa. In August 1955, Rosa Parks, a simple black dressmaker, was arrested and fined for sitting in the white section of a bus. King led an extensive boycott that lasted more than a year, protesting segregation on municipal buses. Martin Luther King's reputation spread quickly across the country, and he soon assumed leadership of the American anti-war movement, first through the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and later the Congress of Racial Equality. Furthermore, as a member of the Association for the Advancement of Colored People, he opened another front to improve the living conditions of his community. In 1960, he took advantage of a spontaneous sit-in by African American students in Birmingham, Alabama, to launch a nationwide campaign. On this occasion, Martin Luther King was arrested and later released thanks to the intervention of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, then candidate for the presidency of the United States. However, he achieved equal access to libraries, dining halls, and parking for African Americans. In the summer of 1963, Martin Luther King's struggle reached one of its climaxes when he led a massive march on Washington in which around 250,000 people participated. During this event, he gave the famous speech titled, "I Have a Dream," a beautiful speech in favor of peace and equality among human beings. King and other representatives of anti-racist organizations were received by President John Kennedy, who promised to intensify policies against segregation in schools and address the issue of unemployment, which especially affected the black community. Despite the good intentions of the president, who would later be assassinated, and the vigorous ethical message of Martin Luther King, awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, it seemed that these measures were not enough to stop the advance of nationalist groups of color who opposed integration and advocated violence, such as Black Power, Black Panthers, and Black Muslims. The permeability of groups of color, especially those living in the ghettos of New York and other northern states, to the influence of these violent groups represented a threat to the core of King's message, which was pacifism. In March 1965, Martin Luther King led a demonstration of thousands of civil rights defenders who marched nearly 60 miles from Selma, where acts of racial violence had occurred, to Montgomery. King's fight had a tragic outcome. On April 4, 1968, he was murdered in Memphis by James Earl Ray, a common white criminal. As his funeral was being held at Ebenezer Church in Atlanta, a wave of violence spread across the country. Ray, arrested by the police, admitted to the murder and was convicted based on circumstantial evidence. However, years later, he recanted his statement and, with the support of the King family, requested that the case be reopened and a new trial held. Martin Luther King adopted a strategy of nonviolent action, inspired by the example of the Hindu pacifist, politician, thinker, and lawyer Mahatma Gandhi. Unfortunately, as we mentioned above, tragic fate seems to affect the advocates of nonviolence. Like his teacher Gandhi, Martin Luther King was assassinated 4 years later. The philosophy and action of Martin Luther King Jr. in the fight for civil rights in the United States. Racial equality and human dignity. Martin Luther King considered racial equality an essential element of human dignity. This equality was backed by democratic and moral principles, and he was a firm defender of democracy. Non-subversive action. King did not advocate breaking the law, but rather argued that unjust laws should not be obeyed, since they go against the moral law. He did not see the fight for civil rights as subversive or revolutionary, but as a just pursuit of equality. In his struggle, King adapted and developed Mahatma Gandhi's concept of nonviolence, creatively applying it in anti-segregationist campaigns. This gave him prominent leadership in the American civil rights movement, earned him the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, and tragically resulted in his assassination by a racist fanatic in 1968. After King's death, the American Black movement took a more revolutionary and violent turn, moving away from King's Christian and liberal inspiration. Despite this, King's memory continues to be revered and loved by the underprivileged masses of his race. The same year as the Nobel Prize, President Lyndon Johnson, Kennedy's successor after the assassination, enacted the Civil Rights Law, which established the equality of all citizens. According to King, blacks had to abandon their abstract political neutrality to strengthen electoral alliances and support trustworthy candidates, because the influence of blacks on political power is important. Only then would the true goal of freedom be achieved, because the destiny of the black people is linked to that of all of America. But now it's your turn to tell us, what do you think of this character? We will be attentive to read you in the comments. If you found the video useful, we would appreciate it if you gave it a like to support our project and if you subscribe. Thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.